20 Facts You May Not Know About Silence of the Lambs. The only genre less recognized by the Oscars than comedy horror sometimes, though, a horror movie falls apart. The Silence of the Lambs is as disturbing a film as you'll find, but it was also a critical darling that spawned numerous sequels and TV shows. As scary as the movie can be, it is still a movie made by the actors and producers. This means that there are facts about the film and its production that we can pass on to you. Maybe read them with the light on. 1 of 20. Silence of the Lambs is based on a book. The film's life as a book began in 1988 by Thomas Harris. He is basically only known for the Hannibal Lecter novels. Harris has written 6 novels in his life, 4 of which are about Lecter. 2 of 20. This is not the first novel in the series. While The Silence of the Lambs is the first film based on a Harris book, it was not the first book he wrote featuring Lecter. The first book in the series is The Red Dragon, which was published in 1981. This book became Lecter's third movie. 3 out of 20. Silence of the Lambs is also not the first time that Hannibal Lecter has been on screen. The aforementioned Red Dragon, technically, it was adapted before the release of Red Dragon. In 1986, before Harris wrote The Silence of the Lambs, Manhunter was released. Brian Cox appeared as Hannibal Lecter. 4 out of 20. They started working on the movie before the book was released. Although Manhunter was something of a flop, producer Dino De Laurentiis loaned the rights to the Lecter character to Orion Pictures for free. They soon began production on Silence of the Lambs. Screenwriter Ted Lally began work on the screenplay in 1987, and as you probably remember, the book was published in 1988. 5 out of 20. Jonathan Demme was not the first choice to direct. Demme was a successful director before directing Silence of the Lambs. He had released films like Melvin and Howard and Something Wild. Oh, and he directed perhaps the most acclaimed concert film in history, Stop Making Sense. At first, Gene Hackman was considered the director of this film. Yes, his actor had partnered with Orion to get the movie rights and was also going to play the role of Jack Crawford. Hackman withdrew from the project and Demme got the job. 6 out of 20. Jodie Foster really wanted the job, but it had to wait. Foster was winning an Oscar and wanted to play the lead role of Clarice Starling. However, he had to wait until he was offered the role. Michelle Pfeiffer's first choice and Meg Ryan's second choice. However, both found the film too gruesome for their taste. Laura Dern was also offered, but the studio felt she wasn't a big enough star. This opened the door for Foster. 7 out of 20. Anthony Hopkins was far from it at first. Dr. Lecter became Hopkins' iconic role, and he was enthusiastic about the project from the start. Well, at least after he read the script. When Hopkins' agent told him about a project called Silence of the Lambs, he asked if it was a children's film. No, Sir Anthony. 8 out of 20. Hopkins had little effect on his performance. Hopkins drew from several influences in developing the way he expressed his personal impression of Lecter. In addition to Katharine Hepburn and Truman Capote, Hopkins modeled his speech on HAL 9000 in 2001, A Space Odyssey. 9 out of 20. Roger Corman had a small role. You'll find Corman, the legendary schlock producer, in many films by respected directors and even several Best Picture winners. There is a reason for that. Dozens of actors and directors who achieved significant success began working on Corman's films. He plays FBI Director Hayden Burke in The Silence of the Lambs and can be seen in Demme's next film, Philadelphia. 10 out of 20. The second known role of Ted Levine is on the other side of the law. To many, Ted Levine is known only as Jim Gum, aka Buffalo Bill, the menacing and brooding antagonist of The Silence of the Lambs. While he appeared in many projects, he spent many years playing the role of San Francisco Police Department Captain Leland Stottlemyre. 11 of 20. The film was a rare dumpwary hit. If you follow the film industry, you might have heard the term dampavary. This is a slang term used to describe January and February on the cinema front. During these months, most studios dope movies that they think have failed. Go back and look at the January and February release dates. The Silence of the Lambs did not fall victim to it. The film was released on February 14, 1991. Yes, Valentine's Day, odd choice, and became the 5th highest grossing film of the year. Oh, and then there was the Oscar success. 12 out of 20. Silence in elite company. When it comes to Academy A, winning the Big Five is pretty impressive awards. That means winning Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and a Best Screenplay Oscar. 3 films have done it. It Happened One Night did it back in 1934, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest did it in 1975. The Silence of the Lambs joined that select group with wins in the Big Five. 13 of 20. Hopkins won in spite of not actually being in the movie that long. Does Anthony Hopkins make an indelible mark on The Silence of the Lambs? For sure. However, he got some bang for his buck in winning Best Picture. The film comes in at just under 2 hours, but Hopkins only has 24 minutes and 52 seconds of screen time. The number that used to be bandied about was 16 minutes, which proved a little exaggerated. Even so, there are supporting actor winners with more screen time than that. 14 of 20. The AFI loves Hannibal and Clarice. The American Film Institute went through a stretch where they were releasing lists left and right. One of those lists was 100 heroes and villains, although there are only 50 of each. Clarice came in 6th on the heroes list. Dr. Lecter finished on top of the villains side of the list. 15 of 20. Brooke Smith has a role related to another classic horror movie. Brooke Smith plays Catherine Martin in Silence of the Lambs. Things don't go great for her. Later in her career, Smith played Sheriff Jane Green on the TV show Bates Motel. That show is a prequel to another horror movie of note, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. 16 of 20. A musical parody proved unexpectedly successful. Silence of the Lambs is so grim, it only makes sense to try and cut the tension and perhaps twist it into something lighter and stranger. Hence, Silence, the musical. Yes, there is an unauthorized, very unauthorized musical based on Hannibal Lecter, Clarice Starling, and Buffalo Bill. Believe it or not, it had a few successful runs. In 2005, it won Outstanding Musical when it debuted at the New York International Fringe Festival, and in 2011, Time magazine named it one of the top 10 plays and musicals of the year. 17 of 20. Clarice and Lecter don't spend a ton of time together. We already noted that Hopkins clocked in with a little under 25 minutes of screen time, and for most of the movie, he's locked away in his prison cell. As such, despite being portrayed by 2 Oscar winners in the film, Clarice and Hannibal only have 4 scenes together. 18 of 20. The moth cocoon was just candy. That moth cocoon found in one of the victims' throats. Hey, we tried to be as ungrisly as possible in writing this, but it was impossible to avoid it entirely. Well, that wasn't an actual cocoon of any kind. It was made of Tootsie Rolls and gummy bears so that it would be edible if it was accidentally swallowed. 19 of 20. Jodie Foster did not return for the sequel. The Silence of the Lambs was a huge success in many ways, so a sequel was a natural idea. This led to Hannibal, a movie that wasn't as well received. It also did not see Foster return. Oh, Clarice returned to continue her interactions with Lecter. Hopkins also came back to play Lecter. However, Foster was replaced by Julianne Moore as Clarice for the movie. 20 out of 20. You won't see Dr. Lecter on Clarice. Even 30 years later, we can understand CBS's decision to make a TV show built around Clarice Starling. The Silence of the Lambs has had enough of a legacy to still gain interest. Plus, we'd get to see Clarice and Hannibal Lecter again. Well, not so fast. CBS may have the rights to The Silence of the Lambs and Clarice Starling, but they do not have the rights to the character of Hannibal Lecter. The show was not even allowed to reference the Doctor, much less depict him on screen. Thank you for supporting our channel by subscribing and introducing us to your friends. The end.